So let's just burn off all the cool Pokemon in this batch of mini episodes. Gyarados is one of my all-time favorites. Aside from the starters and legendaries, he's probably in the top 5 most iconic Pokemon in Gen 1. The other Pokemon I'd put in that category would be Snorlax, Pikachu, and maybe Eevee. I'm trying to think of who would be number 5 on that list. I'm leaning towards Pidgey, just because it's the first Pokemon a lot of players catch, and it's a Pokemon I probably undervalue. But it's definitely a distant number 5. We're not talking about Pidgey, though. We're talking about Gyarados. First of all, until he showed up in the anime, I pronounced him Gyarados, sometimes with a hard G, sometimes with a soft G, Gyarados. I'm sure there are others, but I can't think of any other Gen 1 Pokemon that I mispronounced. Last episode, I talked a little bit about Charmander being one of the only fire types available for a good chunk of Gen 1 games. This applies to water types too in the very early game. Before Mount Moon, right after Pewter City, where a decent water type would have been very helpful, a guy in the Pokemon Center will sell you a Magikarp for $500. I'll often take him up on this offer, drop Magikarp off at the daycare center between Cerulean City and Vermilion, and come back to a nearly evolved Pokemon before going into Rock Tunnel. The Old Rod, which only catches Magikarp, is also available in Vermilion for players that didn't want to buy one, but I kind of like the idea of buying a Pokemon. It gives a Pokemon a story, makes it more personal and whatnot. Why do you think Ash doesn't just capture all his Pokemon in the anime? It's because there's so many more interesting ways to tell that origin story. Anyway, by the time Magikarp evolves into Gyarados, the Super and Good Rods aren't far away, nor is HM03 for Surf. But it's nice to have a Pokemon locked into the role as your water type relatively early in the game. Unlike a lot of Pokemon available in the early game, Gyarados can hold his own up to and including against the Elite Four. And in Gen 1 specifically, he's a great choice to learn both Surf and Strength. So you don't need to do an HM Slave, because those are the 2 HMs that you really need in the late game. Of course, Gen 2 keeps Gyarados relevant by making Red Gyarados everyone's first shiny. As much as I love Gen 2, there aren't very many things that I actually remember about the game. I mean, I remember the Pokemon, especially the legendaries and the starters, and then what I always say, the victory lap around Kanto. But that's really about it. So remembering the Red Gyarados is definitely a thing. He's, a big part of that. Right now I'm making my way through Scarlet version, and when I got to the fire-themed Team Starbase, I went out and found a Gyarados to help me out. Of course, I didn't keep him on the team because I wanted to focus on new Pokemon, but I think he's the only Gen 1 Pokemon who I've used so far. I think that's all I got. We'll see you next time. Got to catch them all or something.